Alexa's Publishing Chat, episode 139. Well, hello everyone. I am so excited to bring you another episode. I'm always excited to bring you an episode. I seem to say that in every episode. So here we go. I'm still excited. Yay. Today I'm talking with Karen Rowe, and I love this topic because we're talking about how to uncover your powerful story and common mistakes to avoid, how to find your ideal reader, imposter syndrome, or being afraid to put yourself out there in the world, and so much more. I really enjoyed recording this episode, and I know you're going to love it too. As a reminder, if you haven't stopped by the womeninpublishingsummit.com/events page, please do so. We'll be adding in some new events coming up in October and beyond very shortly. So we're very excited. Depending on when you're listening to this, our 2025 conference season kickoff webinar is going to be on October 10th. So make sure you save the date on that. We're really pumped up to get moving into the 2025 conference year and just have so many great things planned along the way. We are down to the wire with our book marketing conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, October 4 through 6, 2024. I apologize if you're listening to this after that date, but if you are still on the fence about coming, there is one ticket left. So if you've been thinking I should go to this conference, go to womeninpublishingsummit.com/Charlotte right now and grab that last ticket. I am so excited. This is our first in-person event. We've been doing virtual events for almost a decade, but this is our first in-person event, and I'm thrilled. I'm so excited about it. And I think you'll see our lineup and topics and how we've organized this conference is quite different than most others, and it's going to be a blast. So go grab that last ticket. All right. I think that's all the announcements that I have for you, other than I just am sending so much love to everyone and hoping that you're doing well and surviving all the storms that we are facing in this world right now. And hopefully this, if nothing else, will get you focused back on writing your book and moving forward, especially if you've been struggling with some of the things. So enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, a place where you can come to get inspiration, motivation, help, encouragement, and support in your journey to write, publish, and sell your book. Hosted by Alexa Bigwharf. 'Cause I've been where you've been, and I felt what you're feeling, and I don't want to get in your way. Welcome back to another episode of the Publish Her podcast. Today we're going to be speaking primarily to nonfiction authors about writing their books, uncovering the power of their story, overcoming maybe some of the fears and obstacles that come along with that. And my guest today is Karen Rowe. Karen is a #1 international best-selling author and also the owner of Front Row Seat, a full-service writing firm. She is a nonfiction expert who, for the past 15 years, has specialized in working with first-time authors and entrepreneurs to uncover their own unique and powerful story. Karen has a special fondness for memoir, self-help, business, and leadership books, helping authors create an instant connection with themselves and with their marketplace. She has worked on over 140 books to date. A transplant from the Great White North, Karen lives in Tampa, Florida with her husband and 2 rescue cats. When she's not writing, she enjoys reading, yoga, riding her bike, and going to the beach. Oh my gosh, Karen, you're really making me want to get outside, and I'm trapped inside because it's January while we record this, and also because the summit's coming up and I have so much work and I just want to go ride my bike.
I actually just got back from New York City yesterday, as I mentioned, and I got here and it's 80 degrees, and it was actually a little too warm for me for January. I was like, please, can we have a little bit of cooler weather? So I'm the opposite of you. It's so just hot the summers where I want it cool in January.
Girlfriend, you picked the wrong state to move to if you want cool Januaries. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Well, okay, so congratulations on all of your success with your book writing. At what point in time did you decide that you wanted to be offer a full service writing firm. And please define to me what a full service writing firm means. Does that mean you're a
Sure.
ghostwriter, or do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really an agency. I am a ghostwriter, but we also, what that means to me is that we meet people wherever they're at in the writing process. So
Okay.
I have had people approach me with no idea, but they know that they want to write a book, or they have multiple ideas. Sometimes they've even come to me and said, a business coach told me I needed to have a book, but I don't even know what to write about. So
It's the
right from that
best.
conceptual phase all the way through to publication. So I sometimes have people that need help writing the first draft. That's the ghostwriting part. Sometimes they come to me with a first draft and they need editing support.
Mhm.
Sometimes they come to me with a completed manuscript and they want help publishing. So
Okay.
that's what I mean by that. And then it's really an agency or a firm because it's not just me. I'm
Okay.
really strong on the front end with the idea generation, first draft development, ghostwriting, developmental editing, and then on the back end, I have a qualified small but very mighty team of cover designers, layout designers, copy editors, and proofreaders to that to help get those books to market. So that's what I mean about that, and how I got into it is I was a teacher probably about 15 years ago, and I started a blog on the side, and that evolved into something that I found myself thinking about all the time. That's all I wanted to do. And eventually it started to eclipse my work as a teacher in terms of how I felt fulfilled by it. It's a rather
Mhm.
long story, but the short version is I ended up leaving teaching, and within 6 months, I had a book deal with a small regional
Wow.
publisher in Alberta, and I published 2 books within a year of leaving teaching. There wasn't much money in it, but I really cut my teeth and learned the publishing process,
Mhm.
and then decided, I had a business coach that said, people will pay you to write books if it's something that you enjoy and comes really naturally to you. So, that was
That's
15
cool.
years ago.
Well, I want to say hooray for bloggers turned authors, because I
Yeah.
started my blogging journey about 15 years ago too, which then led to my first book, which then led to all of these things out. So yay, I think once that passion gets lit
Yes.
for writing, you cannot turn it off. It doesn't matter what you do, I can't turn it off. Like
I'm
I
the
just want
same.
more all the time. Also, yay for business coaches that keep telling people that they need to write books, because that keeps us in business.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing about that is that the publisher had a deadline of Valentine's Day, because my first book was a trivia book on chocolate. So
Oh,
they said
wow.
we wanted out in time for Valentine's Day. And something had happened with the previous author they'd hired, and I only had 6 weeks to write the book.
Mhm.
So I basically hunkered down, went into what I call a sensory deprivation, and just wrote it in 6 weeks. And then the business coach was like, hang on, you wrote a book in 6 weeks. People are definitely going to pay you for that. So,
That's awesome. No,
yeah.
it's wonderful. Okay, so uncovering your powerful story is where we're talking
Yeah.
about. So back to the point of, so someone tells you you need to write a book. Maybe it's a business coach, maybe it's somebody I know right now, for example, in my local business meetings and people that I know. One of my friends was telling me that something that's really big and moving within the CEO movement is legacy projects. A lot
Yes.
of them are looking at how they can leave their legacy. Now, you don't have to be a CEO of a big company to write a book to leave your legacy, whether it's a system that you know about, or something, thought leadership type things, or all of those.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of people who have really important things that this world should know about before they leave it. But how do you determine if you have a powerful story worth uncovering?
The first thing is, if other people keep telling you that you should write a book, that is feedback that you should take to heart. I personally believe that everyone has a story to tell. I think it's really human nature to maybe downplay our experiences
Yeah.
and our knowledge, and just, in some cases, depending on the person, assume that, well, everyone knows that. So I
Right.
think part of the process of writing a book is understanding what sets you apart and what stories are unique to you that can create value for other people.
Yeah.
So I always say, as a writer with my own work, that writing gives me a path to tell me what I think about something. Like, it just gives me the time and space to sit down and see what wants to come out onto the page. And you might be surprised. I sometimes sit down to write what I think about one thing and end up taking a complete detour and ending up writing about something else. So that's what
Yeah.
I say when I talk about uncovering your powerful story, is being almost like a channel for that story, and just start by sharing what you know and your life experiences. And again, if you're talking to people about it, or it's something that you can't shut up about,
Hmm.
if it's a topic of interest or knowledge based versus experienced based, that's a great place to start in terms of what your story might be.
And how do you decide who the audience is for that?
Well, I tend to go through a very specific process. To really keep it simple, though, your audience is probably who you were 5 or 10 years ago.
That's a
So,
great way to look at it.
yeah, I mean, for the most part, especially with the books that I work on in the nonfiction space, a really simple way of blocking the subject or the content matter is looking at, like, people are coming to read your book with a problem. And they're at various phases of understanding what that problem is. But essentially, the whole reason they're buying the book and reading the book is because you are going to solve that problem for them. So the simple structure that I work with is outlining the problem in great detail for the reader. Why you're the best person to solve that problem. And usually it's because you were that person. So if we just take as a generic example, like, you were single and unhappy and wanted to be in a, fulfilled, committed relationship, you might write a story about that and what you did to overcome that problem. Or you
Mm.
went from being broke to having money, in the most, very oversimplified terms. And then you solve the problem for them. Here's what I did. Here are the action steps that I took.
Yeah.
And if you can weave your story into that, then that is what's going to keep them reading. So, and what I say about that is, like, you want to ask, I would say there's 4 questions that are crucial to understanding who your reader is. And what the most important one in my mind is, what keeps them up at night? Like,
Mm.
what's causing them pain? Like, why are they coming to the book and reading it? What are they worried about? What gets them mad? What are their top fears and frustrations? And then the other one that's also really important is, what are they really after versus what's the end goal they think they want? So they might think, oh, I want money, or, oh, I want a relationship. But what they're really after might be connection, it might be fulfillment, it might be being seen. So if you can do that work on the front end and speak to that, not only will they continue reading, I mean, they're going to crawl across broken glass
Hmm.
because you will be able to articulate their pain points in a way that they may not be able to, and that demonstrates your understanding of where they are.
Mm. That is such a good description of finding your ideal reader for a nonfiction book. I mean, I've heard a lot of different descriptions, but I think that really makes it a lot easier. I mean, people talk about pain points and solve it, but I love the way that you just described that in a very easy way. What keeps them up at night? What problem do they need solved, and how do you solve it?
Yeah.
So, one of the things about writing a book that on a topic that we're an expert on is that it should be a piece of cake. We already know this stuff. We are the expert in
Yeah.
quotation marks. But I started a lot of my first clients 10 years ago were female entrepreneurs who were writing books to grow their businesses. And
Mhm.
one of the common resistance and obstacles that I had from all of them was fear.
Mhm.
Their fears were different, but they
Mhm.
all spanned across things like, what if nobody buys my book? What if nobody reads my book? Who am I to be the quote unquote
Mhm.
expert? All those
Mhm.
types of things. Why do you think people, I mean, you're a ghostwriter, so you help take out some of those fears, some of the fears of what if I can't write a book? What if I'm not a good enough writer? But I'm
Yeah.
sure you see plenty of other objections and fears as you're working with your clients. What is it that makes us so scared?
Oh, I think it's very vulnerable to share ourselves in an authentic way. And
Mhm.
if you're doing it right, you're not just sharing your wins and your victories
Right.
or the stories where you look good, which is really the ones, those are the stories we want to tell, right? Like, but what you should mostly limit those in your book and share your failures and your losses and what you learned from them, and that
Yeah.
can sometimes feel scary. The other thing is, depending on the stories we're telling, they may involve other people that may be reading the book.
Hmm.
So there is sometimes fear of perhaps repercussion or conflict or uncomfortable conversations. And, people recall events differently. So
Yeah.
especially if you're writing memoir and, you might be talking about a story that involves a parent and they don't remember it, like that can be very difficult. So there's a common saying from Anne Lamott that says, write like your parents are dead, which
Hmm.
means, write from your point of view, but definitely you want to stick to facts that are verifiable and so forth. I mean, that's what I find are the most common fears, or just that fear of going out on the skinny branches and sticking your neck out there. And it's essentially you're opening up yourself to people's critiques and judgments and
Yeah.
opinions about your work that might be deeply not only personal but deeply fulfilling to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that can be scary. And there's all kinds of fears, like fear of success and fear of failure. What if nobody buys my book?
Right.
And for the most part, that's just human nature. And so, what I get them to do is focus on what their goal is and what they're creating and how their book and their message can make a difference, again, back to their reader. So, all of that fear is ego based.
Yeah.
And so, if you can focus it on them and make it less about you, then that's your job as a writer.
Yeah, I never really realized how differently people remember stories and things that happened until I
Mm.
went through a divorce. Then I saw
Yes.
firsthand how two people can remember
Yeah.
one situation completely differently. So I'm sorry, that was just a little funny to throw in
Yeah.
there, but it's so true. I think at the end of the day, I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people in this industry are, but if you don't know who he is, you need to Google him and look at his presentation on, I think it's called The Power of Your Why or something like that. If you look
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
Simon
Start
Sinek,
with why. Yeah.
start with your why,
Mhm.
Sinek. That presentation changed my life, I want to say, just listening to him. But it's also, I think, whenever you go into a project that may bring about some vulnerability, to all the points that you just put out there, like your why has and the outcome of the book and what and who it's going to be for and how it impacts has to be greater than any potential backlash on you from what is probably five or fewer people, maybe even
Right.
just one person, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've seen this before where people have released memoirs and they've ended relationships with family members or things like that. And that's scary and it's sad. But you also wonder, like, if you've written a memoir that had that reaction, did you actually have a relationship with them at that point in time anyway? And I don't mean to
Yeah.
make light of that. It's a really serious thing, but
Yeah, and also I just think there's a huge cost to keeping that story trapped inside
yes.
you, and is it and not speaking up keeping you small? Is it
Yes.
your fear of, your fear of being liked overshadowing your fear
Mm,
of speaking your truth? So those are some big things to deal with. So no wonder writing a book can feel so scary and, vulnerable, because you're facing some really big issues that you might have been stepping over or avoiding or not even aware of until you started writing.
yeah. We see this mostly in memoir,
Hmm.
but with a lot of even like self-help or transformational nonfiction. I mean, you do have to get into those personal stories. So figuring out that line of what you're willing to share versus what is kept out, I would guess. Is that something that you help people do when you're working with them?
Yeah, and my general approach to that is that there has to be enough distance from the event you're writing about to be able to write about it objectively. If
Hmm.
you're still living out the last chapter of the book or still experiencing the pain point that your reader is coming to the book to solve, it's probably too early for you to start writing that book. And I've also heard, I think Glennon Doyle said, it has to be a scab. It can't be an open wound while you're writing
Right.
about it.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's
that's the thing. And obviously just having a second person come in, they have the objectivity that you might be too close, that
mhm.
might be a blind spot for you. So we definitely help with which stories are going to be the most impactful. And also, just as a general rule, I help people focus on either verifiable facts. Can we Google it, and is that a fact, or your thoughts, feelings, and actions on a fact? Because, despite what your mom feels about it, if you're talking only about the facts, what happened and how I feel about what happened, there's not much recourse that they can have. It's not libel or slander. It's just
Right.
my story and my point of view about what happened.
Right. Okay, so once we've moved past our fears and have decided we're going for this and we do it
Yeah.
afraid, because I don't know
Yeah.
that you ever move past your fears, you just learn how to live with them or quell them
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
What are the biggest keys then to successfully complete that book?
Well, I have a lot. I mean, I think one thing that really helps me when I'm writing is understanding what my job is. And my job as a writer is to make the reader care. So,
Mm,
as long as you as a writer can create an emotional response, the reader will keep reading. So, that's the one thing. So, like, what is it that's going to be most important for me to share in terms of the actual writing and the strategy? I think some common mistakes that first time authors make is they don't have a plan.
hmm.
They don't have a really clear schedule. They underestimate the investment, both like emotionally, time wise, financially. Even if you're writing it yourself, there is an investment. But mostly, I think they don't allot enough time for it. So if you're going to write a book, I mean, you're looking at about 400 hours.
Right.
So if you close your schedule, I mean, I wrote my first draft in 6 weeks because I did nothing else for 6 weeks. So if you have a schedule that allows for that, then great. But most of the people I work with, are working full time or
Hmm.
parenting full time,
Hmm.
or, they have commitments, evenings and weekends as well with their families. So you're gonna have to find a place to work that in. Sometimes that means you get up earlier or stay up later. Sometimes it means you are scheduling time for a weekend. You're getting, childcare, or they're with their co-parent, or whatever the case may be. But um that's the first thing, is just have a plan and then follow that plan, because the other pitfall is you schedule the time and then push snooze on your alarm, or
Yes, I might be guilty
calendar
about that.
sliding.
Yeah, I might be.
Yeah, and so the biggest difference I've ever seen, like the biggest tip I have for being successful and keeping those writing schedules is having a non-negotiable external deadline. So that means there's no wiggle room. I think it's the biggest key to successfully completing your book. And I call it creating a crisis. So whether that's an event or a summit you're hosting or speaking at or a fundraiser, someplace where it matters that if the book doesn't get done,
Yeah.
that really serves as a motivator and will give the push that you need when you don't feel like writing, when
Yes.
it's and
Yes.
you're tired, because like the rubber will hit the road, but it's often I found the difference between completing a book or not.
I am definitely someone who operates well under crisis events.
Yeah.
So I do not recommend this as a strategy unless you have written books before and know your publishing timeline and know yourself very, very well. But what I do is I put my book on pre-order. I pick a
Mm,
date that
yep.
should be a realistic date. Like I'm not
Yeah.
like, okay, 6 weeks from now I'm going to publish this book
No,
that I've only written half of. Nope. I
no,
can't do the 6 weeks. My life does not
no.
operate in an environment that would allow that. But I pick a reasonable date. Usually it's about a year out, and I set my book on pre-order. And I think
Yep.
to myself, I should be able to get this done in a year. And then as the time ticks on, like it's eating at me. It's like, okay, now I'm down to 9 months. I got it.
Yep.
Now I'm down to 6 months. Like this has
Yep.
got to happen. And there's real stakes at that because it's not a good look when you have to cancel a pre-order on people. Secondly, if you're going through Amazon, they will not allow you to
Yep.
put a book on pre-order again for a year. So it's very high stakes.
Yes. And the other thing I heard you say, Alexa, in that is that you know what your life is like. So
Hmm.
there is an idea about realistic. I mean, I could work on nothing else for 6 weeks. Number one, because I was getting paid by a publisher.
Right.
Number two, I didn't have kids. I was single. I mean, this was 2008. So you have to have a realistic
Yes.
schedule. If you know that your life is already very overscheduled and chaotic, then you have to work around that or work with that to set yourself up for success. So
Yeah.
it's not about, you know, dropping everything. It's just
Right.
about finding something that's realistically going to work.
Absolutely. So, we kind of weaved in like when is the right time to write a book through that
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
but maybe there's still some room to talk about on this one. Like
Yeah.
if you are, I mean, how do you know if you
Mhm.
can make it happen or if you should push it
Yeah.
off or if now is the right time?
Well, I've got a couple ideas. I mean, the first thing I'd say is if you've recently had a major life event or transition, such as having a baby, moving to a new state, if you've had like the death of a loved one, I would say it's probably not the time. It's
Yeah.
likely best to wait. The other thing I say specifically for business owners and entrepreneurs is if you're in startup mode, I would wait because your
Yeah.
focus then should be on getting business, right? Like
Right.
bringing in money. So, especially if you're bootstrapping, you don't really have the time or resources. You just can't afford it on any front. So, wait until you have proof of concept and enough resources, both emotional, both time, money, to write a book that's going to create value for the reader, but also like you want to build those case studies
Yeah.
and success stories that you can share about in the book, which you might not have. The caveat to that is if you're a serial entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And, I often have clients that they might be running a new business, but they have the chops already established to be able to speak with ease about their subject matter.
Right.
But in all other cases, I would say the right time is probably whenever you start thinking about it, right? Which might have been years ago.
Yeah.
But like the second best time is right now. Like if
Yeah.
you think that like future you is going to have more time or you know like or if you think that the reason you're not writing is because you don't have time, the solution is to get it in your calendar and make time or hire someone to help you. because like it's just not going to happen unless you make it happen. And the other thing I say is like, even for myself, I enjoy to have a window of like a little bit of runway to
Mm-hmm.
jumpstart the book. And if that's the case, like I'll sign up for a writing retreat. Like I
Right.
typically book like a 3-day weekend and I go rent a hotel room at the beach. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just, that whole sensory deprivation that I unintentionally created for myself in the first book, I still do that
Yeah.
because it worked for me.
Yeah.
So, I
I find that too.
yeah,
It,
remove the distractions. And then once
yes.
I have that momentum, then it's easier for me to schedule in something, during the week with my other commitments. Um,
I've started doing that too. I made the decision that writing books is important to me. I mean, I'm running the publishing stuff, but the writing,
yeah,
I want to put my own books into the world. And I finally decided that the only way that I can make that happen is by scheduling time where there's no other distractions, where I'm not with my significant other, I'm not with my children,
yeah,
I'm not at my house,
yeah.
because I will find things to do around my house.
Right.
Even though, and it's funny because I want to write these books more than anything in the world.
Yeah,
Yet, if I don't give myself the right container, I will
yeah,
procrastinate. I will do other things. So I think that's great.
yeah,
Great advice. So
yeah.
finally, what are the top mistakes that you see people make when they're writing a book?
Well, I think we've talked about some of them. I think in terms of content, like not writing to a specific target audience and a specific reader,
Hmm.
is one. Not writing about things that that reader cares about is two.
Yeah.
Like your job, and actually an editor's job is to edit out your ego. But if you, again, keep that focus that your job is to make the reader care, that's a top mistake. A third thing, that's, is not having a plan or a schedule. And then not hiring experts. And like you can write it yourself, but you definitely need to hire someone to do your cover design. Like, please don't do that yourself.
Please.
You can have the best book content, but people really do judge a book by its cover, and it's a split-second decision whether or not they're going to click on that thumbnail or buy that book if they happen to be in person. And you're really doing yourself a disservice by not, you're not good at everything. Even I hire cover designers and
Yeah.
layout designers because that's not my area of expertise.
Right.
And then the biggest mistake I feel like is underestimating the investment required, both the cost of, the
Yes.
emotional, the time.
Yes.
And it's just really like writing is an incredibly valuable investment, both in yourself and in your story.
Hmm. Oh my gosh, so much great information. I love this interview so much. And the cool thing is, this audience of folks spans from people who may have zero time but more money, or some folks that may have less money and more time, or any combination in there. And you have a solution for both of those audiences, either through your book writing course where you help
Yeah.
them, the ones who want to write it and don't want to hire a ghostwriter. And then you also have your full agency to help people write their books, right? So I will include the links to both of these, but for the sake of anyone who's just listening, where do you want to send people for those two things?
Yeah, so the course, if you're looking to write it yourself and need a little assistance, is called bookwritingmaster.com. And that's a self-guided 6-module course. You could do it in 6 weeks if you want, or you can take it one module at a time. It's a lifetime membership once you sign up. And if you're interested in finding more about ghostwriting services, you can reach out to me via my website at karenrowe.com.
And that's ROWE with an end on it, Karen
That's
Rowe.
right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been really insightful and well, just fun. I
Yeah,
really enjoyed this conversation. So thank
yeah,
you for
me
being my
too.
guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. We hope to see you back for the next episode. Great, huge thanks goes to Jasmine Commerce for the use of her song. You can find Jasmine on SoundCloud. Go check out all of her music. We'll see you next time.